Hello, Lisa here and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be my first quarterly deck review. So this is an in-depth deck review of my experience with the Spirit Keepers Tarot. Now, as some of you guys might already know, I am doing a practice that was inspired by the depth here where I pick one tarot deck that I really want to get to know intimately, and I work with that deck for 3 months of the year. So I have been working with the Spirit Keepers Tarot in that way, really getting to know it, working with it a number of different ways, has my sort of go-to mainstay deck since the beginning of January. Now, I picked this as my first study deck for obvious reasons. This has so much wonderful work and thought that has gone into it, and I really wanted to do it justice and see if I could bond with this deck. I will say that I was dubious when I first ordered it because I was concerned. Here's what the inside of the box lid looks like, and here's what the inside of the box bottom looks like. I was a little bit concerned that this would be too esoteric and that it wouldn't be a good reader straight out of the box. So what I did when I first got this deck is I worked with it for a week like I would work with any other standard tarot deck. And in that way I sort of circumvented some of the processes that were recommended in the Book of Maps, which is the accompanying guidebook. And by accompanying, I mean that if you ordered the deluxe first edition, this 447 page book came with it free digitally. Well, it came with the deluxe edition, so I guess it technically wasn't free, but it was a few extra dollars. You got this digital file, and you could yourself order it printed through a printing service, which I did through Lulu. It was inexpensive. I think it was about $20 Canadian, give or take, shipped, so it wasn't bad. And so the first week that I worked with this, I did not work with the Book of Maps. This is what the back of the first edition looks like. It is gold gilded, and this is what the fronts look like. So I worked with it just like any standard sort of Rider-Waite deck. And I found that the imagery was clear enough that if I just, for the most part, disregarded the extra information and the extra titles in the deck, I could work with it just like any other Rider-Waite Smith deck. This is the Holy See, which is the Hierophant, and I can totally see the Hierophant in that image. Most of the images have plenty of Rider-Waite throwbacks in it, and it's totally fine. The one thing that will throw you a little bit when you first are working with this, like a typical Rider-Waite Smith deck, is two main differences that I felt were notable right away. One is that there are 3 key zeros, which is like our typical Fool card. Now, if you want to keep things real simple and you're just working with it like a standard tarot deck, just grab this card, which is the Seeker, and shuffle this into your tarot deck just like you would the Fool card, unless you work with a significator, in which case you would pull this as your significator for a standard style tarot reading. The Seeker is sort of that card that connects you with divinatory readings. So if you wanted to use this deck for divinatory readings, this is the card you would use. However, Benebell designed this deck to be used a number of ways. In one way, you can use this deck as the initiate. Now, this is the key zero you would use if you were just bonding with the deck initially, going through that original process of connecting with it. And there's a process that is outlined in the Book of Maps for how to do that I did not follow, FYI. But it is fascinating, and it is something that I had planned to follow, and then the deck had other intentions for me, which I know personifies it. We'll get to that in a moment. But the initiate is designed for that initial process, or if you're doing a reading about a new undertaking or something where you would basically be an initiate, you can use this card as your significator and either lay it on the table or shuffle it in like any other significator, depending on how you use significators. And finally, there's the Spirit Keeper. Now, I associate this card as I believe it's intended for when you're working with your deck in a way where you want to commune with spirit, where you want to have a conversation with however you identify spirit. Now, Benebell has designed this deck esoterically so that she's done all of the coding and the research and the work so that the imagery itself contains all of what is needed to keep you safe for those sorts of explorations. At least that's what I understand of her intent. And I'm definitely paraphrasing because I'm not her. But she has done a number of wonderful videos explaining her intent, as well as blog posts behind how she put this deck together. So with all of that said, as far as the structure of the deck, the other thing that I found was really different besides the 3 key zeros was the court cards. So in the court cards you have shields, which are the queens of the deck. You have, come on Lisa, I should have organized these before, but of course you guys know I'm not that prepared. I'm not going to find any of them now. That's wonderful. Okay, there we go. The shining ones. And these feature horse figures in the back, which is how I identify them as the knights. And then you also have some more shining ones. Archangels, which are the kings of the deck. And the strongholds, which are the pages. The neat mechanic that Benebell has also introduced us to with the strongholds or with the pages is this little envelope, which is to remind you not only that you're dealing with the page, just like you have this chess pawn piece here, but the idea is that whenever you draw the page in a reading, the envelope is a reminder to draw a second card after that for the message of the page. So if I had drawn this card and then I would have pulled the next card, the page's message would be the champion or the Six of Scepters, which is the Six of Wands in this deck. That is the other thing worth pointing out. The suits are scepters, orbs, chalices, scepter, and swords, right? Yeah, just swords. I thought so. Okay. They are black and white images, and there is a process described in the Book of Maps where, as part of getting to know the deck and making it your deck, sort of personal integration or connection with the deck, you can go through the Book of Maps and color one element that stands out to you from each card, and color just that and work through the entire deck that way. Now, I did do some coloring, but way less than I thought because I just didn't really make the time for it. But what I did the first week that I worked with it, I did color a couple of my daily draws in. So I have colored, for example, these Six of Chalices, which was so much fun. And I think over time I will eventually color a lot more images because it was really enjoyable. Benebell's style of drawing is really pleasant to color. And I do enjoy coloring. So that was really fun. And it does make the card come alive. Not only do you notice all the symbology, but now every time I draw the Six of Chalices, I totally see these little figures in those colors in my mind's eye, which was part of her intent. So the Book of Maps is full of lots of really good information. I will say that one thing that can get a little bit intense is that when you're reading even just the card meanings in the Book of Maps, there's a lot of esoteric information here. And if you're used to working with Benebell's book, Holistic Tarot, this is going to feel like a major departure. But I think it's incredible, and there's a lot of stuff that you can dig into here that's really interesting and has taken me to some new places, both in my magical practice and in my tarot practice. So in Key 16, the Tower, for example, you will have an attribute manifested, a theosophical septenary, I can't say that word right ever, the Saint Germain Key, a path on Spirit's journey, and Sefer Yetzirah. And if that made no sense to you, you are not alone, because it made no sense to me either. But I find that the text here gives you a lot of symbology, as do the videos that Benebell has been putting out. And she's been recently putting out a series of videos in line with the launch of her second edition of this deck, the Vitruvian edition, where she goes through really kind of explains a lot of the information that's happening in the deck, a lot of the intent and symbology, and I find it really, really useful. But all in all, if you wanted to pick up this deck, just never look at the Book of Maps ever and just read this deck straight out of the box, you totally can, and I think it works beautifully in that way, which is why I wanted to do that when I first got the deck. Now, in my period of study, I have read all of the introduction text up until the card meanings. I've read card meanings for any cards I pulled in the last 3 months. And I have done some flipping through very lightly in the last section, but to be honest, I didn't really get into the Book of Maps as much as I thought I was going to. What I did find out is that this was my go-to deck for any time I was doing ritual work. If I was pulling cards in circle, or when I was doing planning a working, wanting to commune directly with Spirit, or just wanted to feel that deeper level of connection, this deck felt like the right deck to reach for. And as a result, I felt that I bonded really well with this deck and see it as the kind of deck I would pull out for my more serious magical workings, these are the cards that I use when I am spellcrafting with tarot, because there is so much wonderful symbology and correspondences that Benebell has built into the artwork of this deck and the design of this deck, that it feels like a very safe deck to play with and work with magically. So this is the one I have been reaching for all of that stuff, which was not something I had ever really felt drawn to do until I had this deck, which is saying something. I feel like it really inspired me to pull tarot into my magical practice in a more direct and tangible way. And I also feel like it has allowed me to open up conversation with spirit in a really new and unique way. And in fact, I find myself reaching for the Spirit Keeper Significator more often than not. There's a few really cool experiences I've had where I've taken the Spirit Keeper card and with intent have shuffled it into the deck and then pulled the cards above or below the Spirit Keeper just to see what messages were there for me. And I've had some incredible experiences doing that. Some really personal, incredible experiences that I wish I could tell you more about, but they're really heart-centered. That said, I've just felt like this has been a deck that has just opened up new ways of working with the tarot. Is this my first choice for decks to read for other people? No. In fact, I don't think I'll ever use this deck to read for anybody else, because it feels like a deck that's very much attached and coded directly to me, in spite of the fact that I never did that initiation or connecting process as described in the Book of Maps. I did not do the holy oil thing. I didn't do the coloring thing as outlined here. And yet, I'm still having a really powerful and wonderful experience with this deck. And I think sometimes, all intents aside, why does that sound weird? Do you ever say a word and then feel like it sounds really weird, right? Regardless of Benebell's intent, which I do think is to make this a very usable deck, I think that people get intimidated, and I was one of those people before I had this in my hands. And I will say that I think truly what's happened here is that all the work's already done for you. So you can learn as much or as little about that work that has been done already as you want to, but it still works. So even if you barely understand the intent and you don't realize all the protection and how all of these different systems were used to merge the Thoth and the Rider-Waite-Smith and blah blah blah, if you don't understand any of that, I think you would still have a really wonderful experience with this deck, which is good news, because as far as I know, at the time I'm filming this, you can still hop on that Vitruvian edition right now. So definitely remember that that is still available. I think the pre-order period has closed, but they did, Benebell and her husband James did purchase or plan for extra decks, anticipating more demand. So the only issue is that anybody that didn't pre-order might get their deck later than those who pre-ordered, but there's still like available decks at the time of filming this to be purchased. So they're going to be going off to print and all that stuff. So they're not like in hand, but they ordered extra. So get on it, because I feel like this is something really unique and special. And as much as this is not a deck that was at all my aesthetic artistically, because I usually go for vivid color, it is beautiful artistically. So it's kind of one of those things. It took me outside of my comfort zone in some really, really great ways, and it's taught me a lot, and I really appreciate that about this deck. I also really appreciate having taken the time to study this deck and spend time with the Book of Maps. But if the Book of Maps itself seems kind of problematic, because it just seems too intense, it's too many words, it's too much study, I totally get it. And so does Benebell, because she created another file that is, I think, free to download for anybody right off of her website. And that is the medium white book for the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. Now she has a medium white book for the first edition, and she also has a medium white book for the second edition, the Vitruvian edition. They're just free downloads. You can like not buy the deck and just download the book, this medium white book, and see if you like it before you even pre-order, or before you even order the Vitruvian edition, if you want to get to know the deck a little better. The neat thing about the medium white book, which I also had printed at Lulu for like $12, I think it was, is that this one speaks to the more, it's way lighter on the esoteric information, which makes it a lot more digestible for those of us who get a little overwhelmed by all of the extra correspondences and stuff. So it gets right into the heart of the card's meanings, the system, how everything is read, and in the back she's even included some really neat charts that help you to identify which card it is you're dealing with. So, for example, Where did it go? Yeah, here we go. So for example, you would have the name or the title of the card in the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, and then you can see what it would be in the Tarot de Marseille, the Rider-Waite-Smith, or the Thoth, and you can compare right across the board. When the first edition first came out, she provided those tables just free as printables that I printed out, but honestly I didn't need it. The biggest thing was just getting to know the court cards, which instead of pages, knights, queens, and kings are, I already forgot, strongholds, shining ones, shields, and archangels. So I didn't forget. It's not that hard. And then those 3 key zeros. Those are basically the thing. It's not that hard. So this book was really great for just diving right in and working with the deck. So I worked with both of these, and when I would pull cards for myself, if I was working with the deck more spiritually, for lack of a better way to express it, I would go to the Book of Maps and read what that had to say, because that usually was all I needed. But if I was just pulling it for more of a general type of tarot reading or divination, then this was perfect for giving me the info. And there's information shared between these two resources, but this gets more plain speak and this gets more esoteric. So you have options, totally. I will say that overall I really enjoyed working with this deck for the past 3 months, and it's going to maintain a spot close at hand for me to be able to dive into it anytime I need to or want to as part of my magical practice, or when I want to work with spirit. I really feel like this is still going to be the main deck I reach for when I'm doing that deeper, more intense kind of work. I also have a special Peggy bag that mine lives in. Isn't it pretty? It's not the same design as what you see on the front of, so there's this like star, this kind of hermetic feeling star here that Benebell designed, and this one is kind of a similar feeling but totally different, you know what I mean? So I just love that embroidery that Peggy did. I think it's really neat. It sort of gives me that spirit keepery feeling, and it just makes me really happy. So this is the bag that my deck lives in with its box, and I always keep the little magnet that comes with it on top of the cards. But yeah, if you've been curious about this deck but feeling intimidated, etc., I'm not going to say it's for everybody, because no deck ever is. That's why it's beautiful that there's so many decks out there. But I do think that Benebell brought something really interesting and new to the tarot community, and I appreciate the heck out of it because I'm having a great experience. So I forgot to bring it to show you, which is part of the video. So I'm going to pause, hold on, and I will splice this one together. So for the next quarter, so for April, May, and June, I am going to be studying and working with the Dreams of Gaia Tarot by Raven Phelan, and I am so excited to be diving into this one. So this is a really, really beautiful deck that has a slightly different system. I fell in love with this deck when I first started playing with it. I have worked with it several times, and I'm pretty quick to reach for this for myself. But I felt like because there were some changes to the system, especially through the major arcana, there are a few, I believe, extra cards. The archetypes are present, but sometimes they're separated into pieces, whereas before they were together. I'll have a better grasp of that at the end of this 3 months, I hope. But also there's some changes through the courts. So there are queens and kings and knights, but instead of pages we have these balancy energies. I'm going to see if I can find one to show you. All the elements are here. The artwork is vivid and stunning. Here we go. So instead of I believe it's instead of the pages. Yeah, this is instead of the pages. You have these balance cards. So emotion and intellect is the balance card you see in the suit of water. So that's really, really interesting. And there's a few other changes here that I want to be able to work with this deck more, and I feel like by studying this deck and deepening my relationship with it, I'll be able to grab this deck for clients, because one thing that I do find really special about this deck and unique is the guidebook. I've already done this with markers so that I can quickly flip to the sections that I need, but what I find is really, really incredible about this deck is what she has to say. You get so much. So if any of you guys have ever had an Alana Fairchild Oracle, you know what I mean. This is not Alana Fairchild, but as a reference point, or as an example, this is the Death Rebirth card in the Major Arcana, which is card 13, so the Death card. And you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a bit pages, full pages, talking about that card. So there's a lot to chew on in this. And how I've worked with this in the past is that every time I would pull a card, I would read what's in here, and it's got a meaning, a potential blockage, which I really appreciate. And I found that this was it had a very healing sort of take to it. It also has like past, present, and future reference. But the way that it's written feels extremely nurturing and self-loving and really healing. I don't know how else to say it. So I've gotten some really wonderful feelings and experiences by working with this and reading through the guidebook. So I really want to take the time to read the guidebook cover to cover over the next few months and work with this book and deck regularly so that I really get to know all the cards really, really well, so that I can pull this for clients as well as for myself. I also want to be able to pull it without having to think so hard about some of the major arcana cards and about those balance cards in the court and that sort of thing. So I really think that this deck and I will have a wonderful summer together, and I will definitely report back about how it goes at the end of the second quarter of 2019. So hopefully you are enjoying hearing me talk about these deeper deck experiences that I'm having this year. I hope to continue this sort of quarterly deck sort of study or move on to sort of a monthly one or whatever. We'll see. But I'm really enjoying doing this through 2019, and I am enjoying bringing you guys along for the ride. So if you enjoyed this, or if you have questions about my experience with the Spirit Keepers Tarot, or things you really want me to report back on about my experiences with the Dreams of Gaia, then definitely let me know in the comments down below. Are you doing any kind of in-depth study with your decks? I'd be curious to hear about that too. So also let me know that. I love to have those conversations down in the comments. And if you're not already, subscribe. Hang out with me. I do lots of tarot and witchy and self-worth related things here on my channel, and I'm happy to have you be a part of our little supportive tarot family. So with that, I'm going to let you guys move along with your day or evening, wherever you are, and I will speak to you all again very soon. Bye!